Chapter 216. Karen Daly understood little Karen's words. The child's mind was very simple, but it carried a different meaning to an adult's ears. Karen Daly shook her head and told herself not to think too much. She could help little Karen take a bath first and accompany her to sleep before leaving. Miss Daly, this is little Karen's towel, pajamas. Sorry to trouble you with these things. Lynn, who usually took care of little Karen, handed over little Karen's toiletries to Karen Daly and left right after. Karen Daly went straight to the bathroom with little Karen in her arms. She didn't even look around the large room, but how could she have known where the bathroom was? Little Karen liked playing with water. She flopped in her bathtub and splashed the water all over Karen Daly's body. Karen Daly rubbed little Karen's head and said softly, "Little Karen, if you play with water, and you'll catch a cold, then you'll get a snotty nose. That way you won't be very cute." Little Karen immediately stopped moving and said, "I don't want to catch a cold, I want to be cute." Karen Daly said, "Well then don't splash around anymore. Let me help you with your bath. After that, let's go to bed, okay?" "Okay." Little Karen nodded vigorously. Karen Daly had never taken care of such a small child. The child was tiny, and her small arms and legs were particularly cute. When helping little Karen with her bath, Karen Daly thought of little Karen's mother, the woman who had disappeared. Her husband was so good, and the child was so cute. How could she give them up so cruelly? Or perhaps what Karen Daly saw was only superficial. How could she, an outsider, know about the family's relationships? Little Karen had been making a fuss for the whole day and didn't take a nap at noon. Now that she was quiet, she was soon sleepy. While she was sitting in the bathtub, she was already nodding off. Worrying that she would catch a cold, Karen Daly quickly wrapped her up with a bath towel, wiped her face, carried her back to the room, and put little Karen in bed. She also helped her put on her pajamas. Karen Daly pulled the quilt over her. When she was about to turn around to clean up the bathroom, the little child reached out her little hand and grabbed one of Karen's fingers. "Mom." Suddenly hearing this, Karen Daly felt that her heart seemed to be pierced. It was a little painful and a little sour. Little Karen never missed her mother during the day, but when she was sleeping, she did miss her mother. Karen Daly stopped in her tracks and sat down beside the big bed. She held little Karen's hand and lowered her head to kiss her little face. "Good girl, Karen. Go to sleep." "Sister-in-law, Miss Daly, I was wondering why the door was not closed. It turns out that you are here to take care of little Karen. Where is my brother? Is he taking a bath?" Mia Kyle said as she walked in, and even stretched her head to look at the bathroom. "Your brother is on a business trip. Little Karen asked me to accompany her. She just fell asleep," Karen Daly replied. Hearing this, she felt a little embarrassed. However, she was not afraid of what other people would say. She had no other thoughts. "Your clothes are wet. I'll get you some pajamas." "It's fine. I'll take a bath in the guest room later. I'll just blow them dry with the hairdryer." Mia Kyle turned around and walked to the wardrobe in Kevin Kyle's room. There were new clothes prepared for Karen Daly every season, and they all hung in the wardrobe, untouched. Mia could easily pass a set to Karen, and it would fit. Mia Kyle took a set and said, "These are all in your size." "In my size?" "No, I mean my sister-in-law's figure is almost the same as yours. You can definitely wear them." It was not good to wear another's clothes. Karen Daly was a little hesitant and did not reach out to take them. "These are all new. They are unworn." Mia Kyle put the clothes into Karen Daly's arms and said, "Don't worry, since you have come here, this is your home too." Karen Daly smiled awkwardly. The fabric in her hand was soft and comfortable, but no one had worn them before. After thinking it over and over again, Karen Daly couldn't help but look at Mia Kyle and asked in a low voice, "Where is little Karen's mother? Why doesn't she even have a picture around here?" After coming here, she realized something strange. There was no picture of the lady of this house. Looking at Kevin Kyle, he should love his wife very much, but there was not a single photo of her in such a big house. This mother who was flying in the sky, in little Karen's words, seemed to have left no trace at all. Upon hearing this, Mia Kyle was stunned and confused. "What should I say? That you are her mother? Because I wanted to trick you to come back, that's why I had put the photos away?" Mia thought to herself. No. Sister-in-law would be overwhelmed if I tell her the truth now. I'm afraid that she will run away. Kevin Kyle will probably send me to hell. Mia pondered. After thinking about it, Mia Kyle cleared her throat seriously and said, "Well, my sister-in-law left because of something that had happened. My brother put all her photos away because he was afraid of overwhelming emotions." Karen Daly nodded thoughtfully. She just thought that it might be because there were some irreconcilable arguments between Kevin Kyle and his wife that they separated, but she felt pity for little Karen. "However, Miss Daly, my brother absolutely did not do anything wrong to my sister-in-law." Seeing that Karen Daly did not speak, Mia Kyle thought that Karen Daly misunderstood and hurriedly explained, "My brother and sister-in-law separated because of a fault in the stars. It is not because of their feelings that they are separated," she said quickly and urgently, for fear that Kevin Kyle would be thought of as a playboy who was unfaithful and heartless. Karen Daly smiled helplessly and said lightly, "I know. No, you don't understand. For some reason, seeing Karen Daly so calm, Mia Kyle suddenly burst into anger. My sister-in-law is not here for the past few years. My brother has been living a terrible life. It's the first time that I have seen him so absent-minded. I feel like his sky has collapsed. If it weren't for Karen, my brother may not have lived any longer. Mia Kyle paused for a moment and tears welled up in her eyes. She stared at Karen Daly with sadness and sincerity in her eyes. My sister-in-law was my brother's everything. My brother's whole world. Do you understand? Karen Daly was not close to Mia Kyle, but after a few opportunities of meeting her, she knew that Mia was a cheerful and optimistic person. At this time, Mia Kyle's eyes were full of tears, as if there was a deep sadness in her, which made her look like she would collapse at any time. Karen Daly couldn't help but pat Mia Kyle on the shoulder. She wanted to comfort her, but she didn't know what to say. Perhaps Mia Kyle said those words to her because she thought that Karen Daly might be interested in her brother. Perhaps Mia wanted Karen to understand that there was only her sister-in-law in Kevin Kyle's heart. She hoped that Karen would not have any improper thoughts of Kevin Kyle. Karen thought while comforting Mia Kyle. Chapter 217. Karen Daly had only met Kevin Kyle a few times within the few days. From their conversations, she knew that he was a gentleman and also an excellent man. The most important thing was that he had deep feelings for his wife. Therefore, she would never have improper thoughts for him. But they had only seen each other a few times, yet she was sleeping at his house. It would indeed cause a misunderstanding. When Kevin Kyle comes back, it's better to stay away from him. Don't let others misunderstand, and don't let little Karen misunderstand, she thought to herself. Don't worry, I'm just here to take care of little Karen. I won't go too far. I can see that your brother loves your sister-in-law very much. Karen Daly smiled harmlessly. It's late, I'm going to rest first. After that, Karen Daly nodded and turned to leave, leaving Mia Kyle, who was stunned again. What? Wait! Mia Kyle stretched out her hand and wanted to grab her sister-in-law. Sister-in-law, wait! That's not what I mean. You are my sister-in-law. The woman my brother loves the most is you. Mia Kyle thought to herself. Please, you must go beyond the limit. Hurry up, and push on to my brother. He has been hungry for 3 years. During these 3 years he has not enjoyed the pleasures between a man and a woman. Please save his exhausted little heart quickly. Mia Kyle roared in her heart, but she didn't dare to really say these words. She had a hunch that if her cold brother knew about what she had done, she might not be able to see the sun ever again. Chatterton Town was a humid place, and the weather in spring weather was also quite warm. Today was a good day. There were a few stars in the sky, and a crescent moon was hanging between the stars. It was a magnificent night sky. Kevin Kyle was not in the mood to appreciate such beautiful scenery at all. He focused all his attention on Karen Daly and little Karen in the villa. He had sent George Ken to investigate the situation. It had been a long time, but George Ken didn't get back to him yet, so he didn't know what the situation was. Looking around, Kevin Kyle was still waiting for George Ken to come out. Kevin Kyle lit up a cigarette and took 2 puffs, using the nicotine to calm his nerves. At work, people often said that Kevin Kyle was an iron-hearted and decisive leader. His decisions had never been wrong. No one could replace him as the king in the world of business. But in his private life, especially in his personal relationships, Kevin Kyle was always an idiot. Not to mention others, Nick Black and Amelia Gray, who had always been by his side, also thought so too. Karen Daly had appeared in front of Kevin Kyle, and he had already found a way to let little Karen bring Karen Daly home for the night. However, he still could not think of how to treat Karen Daly right, so that she could accept him easily and not reject him so much. George Ken walked out of the villa and watched the flickering lights at a distance. He knew it was Kevin Kyle out there, who was smoking. How's Karen Daly? Seeing George Ken, Kevin Kyle put out the cigarette. Although he tried to calm his voice down as much as possible, he could still hear the anxiousness in his voice. George Ken also leaned against the car, took out his cigarette, and lit it with Kevin Kyle's lighter. He took 2 puffs and said slowly, Karen has really forgotten about us. She is not pretending. She really forgot about us. Kevin Kyle lit another cigarette and smoked with George Ken while leaning on the car. After taking a puff, he asked, Do you know why? George Ken took a puff of his cigarette and said, I only chatted a little with her. I only know that she has really forgotten everything about the past. As for the reason, we have to look into this slowly. In this field, you know more than I do. What do you think I need to do? As long as Karen Daly could get better, Kevin Kyle would give away Rovio as an exchange. George Ken paused for a moment and said, I have met many people who lost their past memories. There are a lot of types. Some of them are caused deliberately, some others are because of great trauma, and they choose to forget their past memories. You mean Karen might have experienced some great trauma, and then she chose to forget everything from the past? Kevin Kyle looked at the lights in the villa. After a long time, he shook his head and said, The Karen I know is definitely not that kind of person. A few years ago, she had experienced various betrayals and was abandoned by her family. In that kind of situation, she still went through it strong and lived positively and happily. She was so active, optimistic, and strong. Kevin Kyle did not think that there was anything else that could cause so much damage that she would choose to shut down her memories of the past. George Ken added, memory loss can be categorized into different forms and different degrees. General memory loss can be treated, but I think Karen Daly's symptoms are different from what I have seen before. Kevin Kyle raised his eyebrows. What are you trying to say? He demanded. George Ken sighed. If we can find a chance to get Karen Daly to the hospital for a physical examination and check if her brain has been seriously damaged, it would be useful. If there is no problem with her brain, then we can find reasons in other aspects. Eliminating one possibility can quicken the process. Kevin Kyle. After a pause, George Ken added, I guess, for whatever reason she forgot her past memories. Those memories should have been bad memories. In my opinion, it's better that she doesn't remember the past. As long as we stay with her, she will always accept us. But Samuel Daly stays with her, Kevin Kyle said coldly. His eyes were so sharp that they seemed to be able to kill at a glance. If Karen Daly were not able to restore her memory, she would never believe what Samuel Daly had done before. At the thought of Karen Daly spending the past 3 years with that beast Samuel Daly, Kevin Kyle felt that he was about to suffocate. They all knew very well what kind of evil person Samuel Daly was. Kevin Kyle had given thought that perhaps Karen Daly's memory shouldn't be restored. He was also worried that what happened 3 years ago had caused a lot of damage to Karen Daly. Perhaps she chose to forget them, because the damage had surpassed her tolerance. He even wanted to give up the beautiful memories of their past and let Karen Daly start over with him. It was okay for them to rebuild their family. However, at the thought of Samuel Daly taking advantage of Karen Daly's weakness to make Karen Daly acknowledge him as her father, Kevin Kyle would never forgive him. Samuel Daly, his tricks again. At the mention of this name, George Ken's eyes revealed a hint of malice. Don't mess around. We can't touch him now, Kevin Kyle said. Don't worry, I know how serious it is, said George Ken. They were very clear that Samuel Daly was the only family independence Karen Daly had after losing her memory. If something happened to Samuel Daly, the person who would collapse would be Karen Daly. Chapter 218. Lying on the large and soft bed, Karen Daly didn't feel sleepy at all. Thinking of what Mia Kyle said to her, and thinking of Mia Kyle's sad expression as she spoke, even a cheerful and optimistic person like Mia could not help but shed tears when she talked about Kevin Kyle's past. Karen Daly could not help but be curious. Kevin Kyle obviously loved his wife so much, so why did his wife leave him and their child behind? Of course, Karen Daly was just curious. She never had any improper thoughts of Kevin Kyle. She promised little Karen to come to the Kyle mansion only because of her love for little Karen. Thinking of little Karen, Karen Daly was a little worried. Such a little child sleeping alone in the master bedroom with no one by her side. What if she kicks the quilt away and gets cold? What if she falls down from the bed after rolling a few times? Thinking about it, Karen Daly sighed helplessly. She was not a mother, but already had a mother's heart. She had only seen little Karen a few times. How could she feel so close to the little baby girl? She thought, as long as little Karen spoke, there was probably nothing she didn't want to do for little Karen. This was not good. Daddy, I want Daddy. Suddenly, the child's cry came from the corridor. Karen Daly sat up straight and listened carefully. She wanted to make sure if she had heard it wrong. Then she turned over and got out of bed, running out in a hurry. She was so anxious that she didn't even put on her slippers. When she opened the door, she saw little Karen walking alone in the corridor barefoot. She cried for her father while wiping her tears. Seeing little Karen's pitiful little face, Karen Daly was startled for a long while. The corridor was empty, and no one answered little Karen's cries. She cried sadly, Daddy, I want Daddy. Little Karen. Karen Daly rushed over and held the little fellow tightly in her arms. She kissed her hard on her face again and again. Don't cry, I'm here with you. Don't be afraid. Daddy, I want Daddy. Little Karen cried so sadly. She wouldn't listen to what Karen Daly was saying. When she woke up, her father was not beside her and no one was around her. She was so afraid. Karen, I'll go back to the room with you and wait for Daddy to come back, okay? Karen Daly patted little Karen's back, picked her up, and carried her back to the room. However, no matter how Karen Daly coaxed little Karen was still crying. Her little body kept twitching as she cried, and she had no intention of stopping. Karen, Daddy is not here. Can Mommy accompany you? Karen Daly did not know what to do, so she thought of using this method to coax little Karen. Mommy, I want Mommy. Hearing the word Mommy, little Karen seemed to have a sense of security at once, and her crying gradually faded away. Karen, Mommy will be here with you. Karen Daly patted her on the back and walked around with Karen in her arms. After a long time, little Karen finally calmed down in her arms. Sister? Little Karen, who had stopped crying, turned over her little body and said after a long time, Doesn't Daddy want Karen? Did Daddy fly to the sky as Mommy did? In the past, Kevin Kyle would take little Karen with him if he was on a business trip. So, little Karen, who was now 3 years old, had never left Kevin Kyle even for a night. She slept in her father's arms every night. No matter where she was when she woke up and opened her eyes, she would see her father. Today, when she woke up and opened her eyes, her father wasn't there. Nobody else was around her. For a moment, she was scared. Your daddy just went out to work and will be back soon. Karen Daly kissed little Karen's small face and comforted her softly. His Karen is so cute, of course. Daddy wouldn't leave her behind. Sister, will you stay with me? Big Karen had promised to accompany her, but when she opened her eyes, she was not there. Do adults like to lie to children? Little Karen thought. Karen Daly nodded and said, yes, I won't leave you alone anymore. Sister, pinky promise. You can't break pinky promises. Little Karen stretched out her little finger and twisted it around Karen Daly's finger. Then little Karen said, please stay with me to sleep. Let's wait for Daddy together. As she spoke, little Karen blinked her tearful big eyes and looked very pitiful. Looking at her, Karen Daly felt so distressed that she didn't have the energy to remember that she was in the master bedroom. She lay down on the bed with little Karen in her arms and held the little baby's trembling little body in her arms. Karen, can I sing for you? Okay. Little Karen lay on Karen Daly's body, clutching at her clothes tightly with both hands. It seemed that she was afraid that Karen Daly would leave her alone again. Seeing little Karen like this, Karen Daly felt uncomfortable in her heart. She could not help but lower her head and kiss little Karen's forehead. Little baby, go to sleep quickly. As she hummed, little Karen slowly fell asleep in Karen Daly's arms, but she twitched from time to time while she slept. It could be seen how sad she was when she cried just now. Karen Daly hugged little Karen with one hand and covered both of them with the quilt with the other. Then she kissed little Karen's face and said, good night, little baby. In the room, there was only a glowing bedside lamp, dimly lighting up the room. When Kevin Kyle returned to his room, he saw such a warm scene. His wife was holding their daughter, and the two of them were lying quietly on the bed. In the past 3 years, Kevin Kyle had fantasized about such a scene many times, and reality disappointed him time and again. But this time was different. This time, Kevin Kyle knew that it was real. The large and small figures sleeping on the bed were really his wife and child. He slowly approached them and sat at the bedside, staring at them. He couldn't help stretching out his hand when he saw them. He wanted to touch Karen Daly's face and feel her warmth. He wanted to verify that she was really by his side. However, just as his hand was about to touch her, Kevin Kyle paused again. He knew that Karen Daly was real, but he was still worried that once he reached out to touch her, she would disappear before his eyes as she had done many times in the past. He shouldn't have come back tonight, but after several struggles, he was unable to control himself and came back to the house quietly. He wanted to take a look at them from a distance and leave at a glance, but after that, he wanted to touch her to tell himself he wasn't dreaming. After struggling for a long time, Kevin Kyle's palm gently fell on Karen Daly's face. As soon as he touched her gently, he withdrew his hand. In fact, he wanted to kiss her, but he couldn't. Just as Kevin Kyle retracted his hand, Karen Daly suddenly moved and opened her eyes. The two of them looked to each other's eyes. For a moment, the atmosphere was very awkward, as if the air was frozen. Chapter 219. Karen looked at Kevin. His inky eyes were so deep and full of emotions that attracted her curiosity. Was there something deep inside? At the end of the darkness? Although the light in the room was not very bright, she was sure that his eyes were full of affection. She saw the affection that should have belonged to another woman, and it felt very wrong. Why would he stare at her in this way? Did he make some mistakes? Perhaps he misunderstood her purpose? Kevin wanted to look away, but he couldn't move his eyes at all. His eyes were fixed on her face, noticing every single slight change of her expression. Seeing her stunned for a few seconds, he frowned and looked away quickly. Mr. Kyle, you are finally back. I was just taking care of little Karen. She stuttered in a panic, and she was embarrassed. The man of the house had returned, but she was sleeping on his bed. How embarrassing it was for her. Kevin couldn't catch what she said. To be precise, when he heard her say Mr. Kyle, he didn't want to hear the rest of the sentence. Mr. Kyle, it was back to Mr. Kyle again. These two words were obviously the same, but now there was only the sense of alienation between them. It sounded so cold that he hated it. Kevin only felt the anger burning in his body, that he wanted to not care about anything. He no longer cared about her feelings, nor did he consider if she remembered the past. He just wanted to hold her in his arms desperately, kiss her fiercely, and tell her, Karen Daly, you are my wife. The rage in his chest was overwhelming, but in the end, he suppressed everything and said with a faint smile, because I have never left her alone without me, so I rushed back after finishing my work. So sorry that little Karen caused some trouble for you. Little Karen is a good girl. Karen glanced at the child who was sleeping soundly on her body. She smiled awkwardly at Kevin. She gently carried little Karen off her body, put her aside, and got out of the bed. I'll leave her to you then. I'm going to rest first. Kevin nodded in the same polite manner. Well, I'm sorry to bother you. It's okay. Karen smiled politely and said, You've been busy all day. You should also rest early. After that, she turned around and left quickly. Miss Daly? Just as she was about to walk out of the door, Kevin suddenly stopped her. Karen turned around and smiled politely. She said, Mr. Kyle? Yes? Kevin pulled up the quilt and covered little Karen properly. Then he walked towards her gracefully and said, I would like to have a chat with you. Would you give me this opportunity? His eyes were fixed on her. She wanted to dodge, but she felt that as long as he looked at her, she would have nowhere to hide. Those eyes, which seemed to have followed her for thousands of years, were full of determination and perseverance. But what could a man and a woman talk about in the middle of the night? And what did he mean by giving him this opportunity? Did he think that she was interested in him? He should not think so, as all her focus now was on work. She was not interested to be in a relationship, moreover, interfering with another person's family. However, since Kevin had already started the conversation, she could also take this opportunity to talk to him about it. She would say that if it was not necessary to meet him in future, she would not meet him. Karen nodded. Okay. Kevin was happy when she agreed. This was the first step he took to get close to her. As long as he succeeded, he could get close to her naturally in the future. However, before he could celebrate his little success, the happiness was abruptly ended by her next sentence. Mr. Kyle, I promised little Karen to come to your house was because I like her, and I thought that you were away on your business trip, so you won't be back. I also know that you love your wife very much. Please be rest assured that I really don't have any improper thoughts for you, or that I am interested in you. Kevin? Her voice was still so gentle, but every word was so powerful that they seemed to pierce his heart. The pain was so great, it could not be more intense. He wanted her to have improper thoughts for him. The more she thought of him, the better it would be. How could she not have any ideas? Seeing that Kevin did not respond, Karen continued without hesitation. Mr. Kyle, I will leave tomorrow morning. As your family's outfit designs, I will send someone to show you the first draft as soon as possible. Just let her know if you're not satisfied. She finished her words in one breath, but he didn't want to listen. The anger that he had just suppressed was rolling again this time. It was far more turbulent and uncontrollable than the last time. Kevin lost control. He held her chin and held her in his arms before she could react. He lowered his head and kissed her hard. For a man who had been controlling himself for 3 years, once he kissed her, he was like a hungry beast. The kiss was so hard that it seemed that he wanted to make up for what she owed him in the past 3 years. 3 years of yearning, 3 years of loneliness, and 3 years of despair were all concentrated in this kiss. It was fierce but full of love. Oh, Karen's words were blocked by this kiss, leaving only a few vague syllables. With her eyes wide open, she looked at the magnified, handsome face in front of her, in disbelief. For a moment, she forgot that she should have pushed him away. When she realized that this was extremely improper, she wanted to push him away, but she couldn't. Kevin's was much stronger than she had imagined. He wore glasses and looked gentle, but there seemed to be some infinite power in his body. No matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't push him at all. She couldn't push him away, so she lifted her foot and kicked him hard, but he didn't feel any pain, and he didn't stop kissing her. Karen was so angry that it boiled from the bottom of her heart. She thought he was a gentleman not long ago. How could he do such a thing to her? Isn't he deeply in love with his wife? Do all men change their feelings so quickly and fall in love with another woman so easily? Just when Karen felt completely helpless, Kevin finally let her go. Chapter 220. However, before she could take a breath, Kevin held her into his arms again, as if he wanted to embed her into his body. Karen Daly, I won't let you leave me anymore. He said it softly, like a murmur, or more like something which had been rehearsed for 100 times, from the bottom of his heart. Abruptly, she stopped struggling. In a trance, she seemed to understand why he was out of control. After a long time, she sighed softly and then whispered, Mr. Kyle, is your wife, also named Karen Daly? Kevin seemed to have known her from a long time ago. The way he looked at her was very different from the first time they met, but it was only until now that she realized it. Perhaps it was because she had the same name as his wife, and her figure was somewhat similar, that he mistook her as his wife. Even little Karen would rely on her so much. It was probably because of this too. With such an explanation, all the unreasonable things could be explained. They all regarded her as another person, while the other Karen Daly was not her. Although she had nothing to do with them, being treated as a substitute still made her feel extremely uncomfortable in her heart. As soon as she finished her words, she felt that Kevin's body was slightly stiff, and the strength holding her arm was loosened. Yes, my wife's name is Karen Daly, and she looks exactly like you. I lost her 3 years ago. When I met her again, she was with her scumbag of a father. This was what Kevin wanted to say to her in his heart, but he knew that he couldn't say that to her. Regardless of whether Karen would, believe it or not, it would only add salt to her wound. If Karen believed him, but she was unable to find the memories she had before, it would drive her crazy. If Karen did not believe him, she would stay away from him, and she would not even be willing to see him again. Therefore, Kevin could only push the woman he had missed for 3 years away from him, watching her getting further and further away from him. Kevin didn't know what he could say. Her expression now was like a frightened little kitten, full of fear and vigilance. She never looked at him like this before, not even during their first encounter years ago. To her, he was worse than a stranger. Thinking about it carefully, this period of time of her return felt long and painful to him. He got what he wanted, but lost it again. He was so happy, and then he felt desperate. The difference between heaven and hell was just a fine line to him. But even so, he was still glad that he had met her again. His feelings for her were deeply engraved in his heart. Karen Daly, did you know how much I missed you? Although you are right in front of me, I miss you more than ever. Kevin let go of Karen completely. There was a smile on his lips. She could even see the smile on his lips. This smile was definitely not joy, but more like helplessness. The helplessness of a moth darting into a flame. I'm sorry, Kevin said. His voice was a little shaky, but he still held his gentleness. I was out of control. She suddenly couldn't say anything. There was a voice in her heart that wanted to break out, but in a flash, it was pulled back to the bottom of her heart and returned to silence. She should be angry. If she was forced to kiss a man as a substitute, she should be angry. But why wasn't she getting angry? Have a good rest, Kevin said, slowly walking out of the room. Don't worry, I will never lose my composure again this way. He stood at the door as he made this promise. He didn't look back at Karen, and then left. His figure seemed so lonely that she wanted to walk forward and hug him. She stared at him for a long time without moving, caught in a daze. On the breakfast table, Kevin's face was gloomy. He did not only ignore Mia, but also little Karen. Seeing that the situation was dire, Mia didn't want to have breakfast too. She stood up and said, Sweetie, Auntie is going to work soon. See you in 2 days? Little Aunt, sure. I have Big Karen to accompany me. In the past, when Mia left, little Karen was always reluctant to part with her, but today she waved her little hand happily. It seems that you don't need little Aunt anymore now, that you've got your mother. Mia couldn't help murmuring while hurrying away. The reason why she left so quickly was that she was afraid to see Kevin's gloomy face. She was afraid because she was guilty. She was worried that her cold brother had found out what she had said yesterday. He said he was on a business trip, but he appeared at the breakfast table early in the morning. Her sister-in-law, who was still there late at night last night, had disappeared in the morning. Mia did not need a high IQ to tell that something must have happened between these two people, leading to a tense situation in the morning. Over the years, she had learned to be very clever. Whenever she encountered something related to her sister-in-law, she would stay away from it to avoid conflict. Cut. She didn't know how many times the director had stopped her. Mia was running out of patience. The director said, Xander, you are now the male lead. The woman you kissed is the woman you love deeply. Why do you look so bitter? His acting skills were so bad, and his looks were ordinary. The director really couldn't imagine why such a person had become famous. Of course, he kept this in his heart without saying it. Xander said, Director, can we just skip the kissing scene? Because of the scandal that happened, Xander's agency had made it clear that he could not have any contact with Polaris. This film contract had been signed before the scandal, and the script he received previously did not have a kissing scene. Somehow, they added the scene after. Xander did not need to be a genius to guess that the photo was sent to the tabloids by Polaris. He also figured out that this kissing scene was added on her request. He didn't want to have anything to do with Polaris anymore. And he didn't want his career to be ruined by such a woman. Although Polaris was much more popular than him now, and might be able to increase his popularity, she was bad-tempered and had a horrible background. If he got along with someone like her, he would be dragged into trouble sooner or later, so it was better to stay away from her. Mia had long wanted to get angry because of the frequent cuts, but she also had her own professional ethics. No matter how angry she was, she suppressed it, and did not say a word. She did not expect this man to dislike her to this extent. No one else except for Neil Brown dared to dislike her. Mia could not tolerate Xander's attitude when he requested to remove the kiss scene. She raised the sword in her hand and pressed it against Xander's throat, which scared him and made him tremble. Polaris, what do you want to do?